I'm Nicole Christofferson. I'm the chairman of the GPA committee here at the board, and I'm super honored to be introducing Mayor Will O'Neill for our State of the City here today to all of you in the membership. While he really doesn't need too much of an introduction, I think we're all pretty familiar with him in our community and what he's been doing. He is currently running unopposed in District 7. He's graduated from Stanford. His wife, Jenny, was a former elementary school teacher. And he's just been an honor to get to know throughout the last year, and look forward to hearing what he has to say today. So thank you for joining us.
Absolutely. Really appreciate the opportunity. There's a lot to cover, so I'm going to jump right in. Today, I'm going to run through, because there's going to be a lot of discussion about some data and charts, so I'm going to go ahead and share my screen with with my PowerPoint presentation. And also, I will just point out, I am one of those many people that is going through house renovations. So if you hear a little bit of construction noise, my apologies, but that is the nature of working from home these days. So thank you very much. I am indeed the Newport Beach mayor. I have been in one of the most interesting, if not the most interesting years in Newport Beach history. And I'm going to talk a little bit about what that has been like. So let's start by just kind of even where to start. Here's what I'm going to try to cover. I'm going to cover quickly COVID. I want to give an update on where we are as a county. I'm going to talk a little bit about what the metrics mean and where we are as a city. We're going to talk a little bit about our budget and what is meant for us to try to work through all of the COVID restrictions. We'll talk a little bit about public safety. Obviously, this group would love me to talk a little bit about housing and RHNA. We actually have some information that came out of our council meeting last night that I'm going to touch on. We'll talk a little bit about homelessness, talk a little bit about my quick daily updates, and then very quick overview of the elections. I won't be encouraging anyone to vote, for anyone, but I will be covering that a little bit. And then just reminder, this is still the year of the volunteer. So I'm going to talk about that, and I will leave a little bit of room for Q&A at the end. All right, here is what the hospitalization numbers have looked like from March to today. And this is true for Orange County, for California, for Los Angeles. I like comparing to Los Angeles because I think it gives an indication. Kind of counties are different, and they have a lot of different counties. If you look at this, have had different peaks and valleys and peaks and valleys. Orange County had one, and it was a big one, and that occurred right after Memorial Day when everything reopened, and then it spiked up. The top number up at was actually around, I believe, July 22nd, somewhere in that range. July 14th was we had 722 people who were hospitalized with COVID. It doesn't mean that they were hospitalized because of COVID, although the vast majority of them are. Everyone who goes into the hospital these days is tested. That includes moms who are giving birth. It includes anyone who's going in for a regular an elective surgery. But we did have a substantial increase, and so we have fortunately come way back down. And so you can see that in both the ICU down below, which is included in the positive patients chart up above. Quick reminder, we have over 6,000 available beds in Orange County. So at our peak, we were right around 12% of our beds were occupied. So if you're talking about trying to make sure that we were flattening the curve, we very much always did. We were never overwhelmed the same way you saw in Italy or New York City toward the beginning of March, April, and even into May. And so in Orange County, we saw that spike. It has come back down. Then the same is true for California. You see that massive spike that tracked right along Orange County. Los Angeles was a different case. Los Angeles actually spiked very early, and then it kind of came back down a little bit and then spiked again right around the same time, and it's come back down, and you can see that. And so the amazing thing about Los Angeles is their ICU cases are actually now below, slightly, but below their March peak, which is unbelievable, frankly, that they've reached that point. And that's a big deal. And I think that it's probably not getting quite enough attention, but I want to point out that as we're moving through the hospitalization information, there's a lot to be encouraged by in terms of the hospitalizations and the rapid decrease there as well. I want to point out, just I keep track of what we see in terms of 30-day trends. I also try to keep track of the 2 weeks before versus the past 2 weeks versus the 2 weeks before that, to kind of see where we are in trends. So this information right here goes ahead and shows the, goes ahead and shows how we're doing in the last 30 days compared to a lot of other cities. As you can see, Newport Beach over the last 30 days, pretty comparable in terms of where we probably should be compared to what I would call comparable cities like Huntington Beach and Costa Mesa, and then even little tiny Laguna Beach. So we're right in line with most of them, if not slightly better in terms of the number of people who are testing positive. You can see Anaheim, Santa Ana, they're still continuing to lead the pack big time. And that's true. That has been true for quite some time. When we're looking at the, Nicole, I gotta ask, can you hear the construction noise? Is it bad? It's not great. Okay, hang on. Let me see if I can move.
It just sounds like drilling.
I'll tell you what, give me just 1 second and let me tell them to just take a pause. Sorry.
Sounds good.
Okay, so then what I want to do is I also want to talk about the governor's metrics. So when we're talking about the governor's metrics, it's probably worth remembering just a few things and run through. So back in March, the phrase was flatten the curve. And so we shut down the economy, the state shut down the economy in order to flatten the curve. And then the governor rolled out a 4-phase plan for reopening, and that was back April 28th. On May 23rd, Orange County reached what they called phase 2 at the time, which allowed a lot of reopenings. We also saw business reopenings, and then at the same time, we also saw protests rolling out nationally and also in our county. And then, I mean, I still picture that day, June 8th, when about 50,000 people or so were in the streets in Hollywood. That picture is unbelievable. But then 3 weeks after all of that happened, the governor scrapped that 4-phase approach, went to that watch list approach, which was focused. Remember, all of this had been focused on hospitalizations, all of it. And so that new watch list included hospitalizations and also infection rates. And so Orange County did finally roll off that watch list on August 23rd. We were promised, by the way, at that time, if you roll off the watch list, your schools can reopen in 14 days. The governor, though, changed the metrics because at that time, the question was, well, what can reopen when you roll off the watch list? Turns out there wasn't an answer to that. So instead of answering that, the governor then changed to, and now you see on your screen, this 4-tier model, which goes purple, red, orange, and yellow. There is no green. The governor's been very clear. He doesn't intend on creating a green anytime soon. And because of that, we are not going to see, even under the best case scenario with a vaccine or anything along those lines, right now in California, we do not see a fully reopened path. The state, so I'm going to talk about this watch list in just a second, but I'm sorry, the 4-tier system in just a second. But one of the questions early on was, okay, what's the justification for switching from this watch list to this new tier system? And I'm not going to ask you to read all of it, but there is that point in here where it says, so why change? And it says, well, we learned some things. And I agree, we've learned a lot. And one of the things they said is, for example, we know how much safer outdoor activities are than indoor. And I'm just going to point out, yes, we knew that. And I'm mentioning that because you may recall when back in April, we got our beaches closed. And one of the things that I fought really hard for at that time was, wait, the science is showing us it's a lot safer to be outside. And we're being told by our partners at places like Hogue that house parties and bars are the places where people are getting more infections than other areas. Maybe focus on making sure that there are large open spaces outdoors for people to go instead of forcing them back inside into house parties. And so I just don't think that this is a great use. And this, by the way, this picture is still on the state website for the blueprint data explaining what happened to the county monitoring list. So I point all of this out to say that there are reasons why I'm a little concerned about this tiered system, because this frankly does not answer the question of why they switched to this new tiered system. Now, that said, the tiered system is based on basically 3 metrics. It used to be really only 2. The first metric is positivity percentage. Positivity percentage is easy. You take 100 tests, how many of those tests came back positive, and you average that over a 7-day period with what they call a 7-day lag. So if you're looking at Monday to Sunday, then you need to go back a week before the week you're sitting in. That's the 7-day lag. Then you average those 7 days of positivity percentage. The case rate is over those 7 days, those same 7 days, how many people out of 100,000 buckets of 100,000 have tested positive. So in a city, in a county of 3.2 million people, like Orange County is, we have 32 buckets of 100,000 people. And so you need to be below, and you can see this, if you want to be in the red, you need to be in a case rate of between 4 and 7, which means, so let's say you've got four people on average testing positive. That's 4 times 32, which is your daily amount that you can have and still be at the lower end of the red tier. I like to use the Rose Bowl analogy. So the Rose Bowl itself seats around 90,000 people. So if you took all of those people, all the players, all the people who work there, and everyone around the stadium, that's about 100,000 people. So on average, you can only have 4 to 7 to stay in the red tier. 4 to 7 of those people every day testing positive for COVID. That's how you get to that 100,000 person metric. We just had our metrics come out yesterday. So for Orange County, our testing positivity percentage is 3.5%. So we are solidly in that orange tier for that. Our case rate, however, is not. Our case rate is 4.6. So we are still at the very low end of red, but we are still in red. And so if you are in the red tier for one and the orange tier for another, you are going to stay in the red tier. And the other thing to note is you need to be in a lower tier for 2 straight weeks. You may recall Orange County 3 weeks ago was in the orange tier for 1 week. We were not in it for the second week. We saw a bump that most people attribute to Labor Day. And so therefore we have stayed in the red tier. There is one thing I do want to point out. If you look to the left of this slide, you see that it's actually the adjusted case rate instead of the true case rate. One point that a lot of people have made is, well, if you stop testing, you will stop getting cases. And so your case rate will plummet. Yes, that's true. But what would happen to you very quickly is you would have what is called a multiplier. So the state is trying to encourage testing. And so what they've done is they say, look, how are you testing above or below the state average out of 100,000 people? And so if you are below, they will multiply your case rate by a certain amount in order to get to what they call the adjusted case rate. If you are actually above, like San Francisco is way above, then their case rate actually gets reduced because they are testing so much. So there's an incentive to test. So if you are above the average, you get your true case rate reduced, and that's your tier. It's actually the adjusted rate. It's not your true rate. Interestingly enough, Orange County is so close to the average, we actually don't have an adjustment. So our true rate is the same as our adjusted rate, which is 4.6 out of 100,000 people average per day. Then I want to also talk a little bit about the new health equity metric, which is very difficult to explain. So I'm going to try very hard to keep it at a high level. The health equity metric, the goal of this is we know that there are certain populations, especially those in areas where access to healthcare is not nearly the same and the socioeconomic status is much lower than other areas of our county, that are getting much harder hit by COVID than the areas that tend to be wealthier and tend to have more access to healthcare. And so and this is true in every county. And so what the state has tried to do in response to this is they've created what they call a health equity metric. The goal of this metric is to ensure that communities harder hit by COVID-19 based on socioeconomic reasons are not left behind. The state's approach to this is to take census tracts, which I've shown in this graphic. They like large neighborhoods. So for example, Lido Island is its own census tract. You can kind of see you can see the different colors. The different colors I'm going to explain in a second, but these are a lot of these, as you kind of see the color changes, they're census tracts. They are actually, when you see a long series of one color, that does not mean they're the same census tract. It just means they're a bunch of census tracts in the same color. But the way they use these census tracts is they actually score each census tract using something called a Healthy Places Index, which I'm just going to call it HPI. The HPI score is a composite of 25 different factors. I'm not going to cover all of them, but some of them are, they totally make sense. How much access to clean water do they have? How much access to healthcare? How much access do they have to clean air? But some of the factors are just odd. So here's what a census tract looks like when it's overlaid with HPI. The darker blue is bad, the darker green is good. And then the bottom quartile of counties, and this is where the health equity metric, the bottom quartile of the county's census tracts by HPI score have to be within a certain range of the testing positivity percentage. So it's not, they don't take into account case rate. And I'm going to come back and I'll show you the slide again, but they have to be within a certain percentage. I'm just going to point out though, the HPI does lead to some funny situations. So for example, up in Newport Coast, out of 100, the HPI score is like 98 or 99. But if you live on Lido Island, your score is actually like 64. And it's the strangest thing, because that is easily one of the most expensive places to live in our county, if not the country, as most of you probably know. But Lido Island, because it's around 64, the reason for that, and I really dug into the numbers, it's because of weird, kind of strange little factors like this. So they score a 6 out of tree canopy. So tree canopy factors into an HPI score. Supermarket access, 2.4 out of 100. I had no idea you could not get to a supermarket on Lido Island, and I'll bet they didn't know that either. So park access, retail density, alcohol availability, these are all these scores that factor in that I think is important to point out. Now, I told you I'd go back to this and just show you real quickly. The health equity metric requires them to be within a certain amount. So they have to be under 5.3% on testing positivity percentage to get into orange. So if our, so this is where it comes in. If our testing positivity percentage is in orange and our adjusted case rate is in orange, but our health equity metric is above 5.3, we will not move into orange. It's really important. Right now it's at 6.5. Last week it was 6.6. So if you're keeping score at home, I am confident to say we will not be moving into orange very soon. And I'm sorry to say that because it's really frustrating to a whole lot of people, but that's based on everything I'm seeing in terms of the movement down. I just don't see us moving into orange anytime soon. Remember, you have to have at least 2 weeks anyway. I just don't think it's going to happen in the next 2 to 3 weeks, which means add on anything I just said +2. Okay, so let's talk just real quickly about Hoag. They've been awesome. I can't even begin to express. Early on, the city just made the decision, look, we are not a healthcare agency, so we are not going to treat our laws like we are a healthcare agency. We're not going to be creating new laws. We're going to depend on our state healthcare agency, our county healthcare agency, and then for our local partners, we're going to make sure that we amplify their messages constantly. And so they've done a fantastic job. They have an unbelievable leadership staff over there. And Newport Beach is a much healthier community because of Hoag. And I will just say to everybody on here, I really do appreciate everything that Hoag has done for me in terms of being able to have an educated conversation about the health of Newport Beach and how to make our city healthier, and also all of the work that they have done simply to make our community healthier. So I can't even begin to express the appreciation I have for all of the doctors and leadership at Hoag Hospital. I will also say UCI has been fantastic too, and to all of our frontline healthcare workers, thank you. Seriously, it's just unbelievable the effort they've made this year. And so Hoag Hospital had a mask up campaign. They really encouraged wearing facial coverings, especially when you're indoors with other people. And so I actually joined that effort. All 34 mayors came together, created a PSA on masking up. I will tell you, I have taken a little bit of grief on social media for this one. There's still a lot of people who really don't like facial coverings at all. My view on it is, I made a commitment early on that I would amplify Hoag's message. That's exactly what I'm doing, and I have come to trust their judgment and opinions. And so that is exactly what I decided to do early, and I will continue to do so, because again, you have to have some humility in this job and know that you don't know everything. And I know I do not know everything, and I very much appreciate the expertise that I've been able to rely on this year. All right. Obviously, one of the things that happened is that with the shutdowns is it changed business dramatically. It also changed the way that cities, because of the way that it changed business dramatically, rely on tax revenue. Now, I want to point out, especially for this group, just how huge it is that we rely on property taxes. This shows the three major sources of revenue for a city. This is property tax, sales tax, and transient occupancy tax, otherwise known as the hotel bed tax. The more reliant you are on property taxes, the better off you are as a city, because that is the most stable revenue source possible, especially because of Prop 13. As you all surely know at this point, there are a lot of people in Corona Del Mar who have owned their homes for 50 years. They're paying way less than the neighbor that just moved in, and that's okay, because that's exactly the purpose of Prop 13, is to make sure they're not priced out because of taxes. And so because of that, we know in Newport Beach that we are going to see a stable increase in our property tax revenues, because there is that catch-up factor when it comes to property taxes. So we're not going to see a dramatic increase. We're not going to see a dramatic decrease. We actually are a much more stable community because of Prop 13. And I will continue to fight for Prop 13. I will continue to fight against Prop 15. The city has actually taken a position against Prop 15. So I just want to point that out. Newport Beach, as you can see, heavily reliant on property taxes. We are reliant as well on sales taxes and TOT, but not nearly to the extent that Costa Mesa is. As you can imagine, Costa Mesa's reliance on sales tax comes almost entirely from auto dealerships and South Coast Plaza. And with South Coast Plaza being closed most of this year, they are hurting. They had to go through a furlough process. Anaheim, oh my goodness, Anaheim. So Anaheim, just imagine what they're closed. They've got Disneyland closed, they've got the Convention Center closed, they've got the Ducks closed, they've got the Angels closed. It's unbelievable what they're going through over there. And look how reliant they are on all of those other sources that are ebbing and flowing like crazy. We just don't have that same ebb and flow. That said, we did need to look at our budget and say, okay, so we have a $230 million general fund budget from last year. How much do we need to reduce that by? And we were very conservative in this approach. So we actually reduced it by technically 33 million, although I'm just going to tell you that just assume it basically went from 230 down to 199. So we reduced our revenue expectations by over $30 million. And so how do we do that? Well, oh, and this is, well, shoot, I stepped over my slide here. So you can see our up there in the red, it just shows $230 million. That was our budget from 18-19. 19-20, actually, we revised it down quickly once we realized where we were in terms of the shutdowns. So we reduced our budget by over $10 million. And then once we did that, we then reduced it even further to start the year. I will tell you that we have done much better than anticipated. People are going out, especially to restaurants and whatnot, because they're not taking European vacations. They are staying around here. They are loving the outdoor business environments, and they love the outdoor restaurants. I love them too. I actually helped write that code with a couple other council members that allowed for businesses to go outdoors. We have over 100 restaurants at this point that have gotten the permit to go outside. And it is really, and I'm hearing that as a lifeline that has really sustained a lot of our restaurants in ways that aren't working for other cities. Again, I kind of go back. People in Newport Beach seem to talk about 85 like it's 130. So anyway, just saying. This is how we were able to cut the budget down. I'm not going to go through this too much because this is really wonky, but I'll just kind of remind everybody. I'm the chair of the city's finance committee, so I can get very wonky on this. I'm going to try very hard not to. So when I'm looking at this, I'm going to just tell you what we did was we took 6 tiers and just said, it's almost like a trigger. So if our revenue reduces by this much, this is what we cut. If it reduces by this much, this is what we cut. Boom, 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 all the way down. A lot of it relied on, initially we did some operational cuts. We brought some stuff back in. We stopped spending as much on outside vendors. We also had a temporary hiring freeze that we are sort of lifting right now on a case-by-case basis. We reduced our transfers in and out. Those transfers in and out are really it comes from our capital projects and what we call nice to haves versus need to haves. So need to haves are roads and buildings and things that you expect from regular spending. Nice to haves, there are 2 really good examples. One of them is the junior lifeguard building. I do believe we are going to do it, but it's been delayed. The really planning for it's been delayed by a year. Same thing is true for the library lecture hall. Same thing. It's been delayed a year. We're going to continue to work through it, see where we are in the next fiscal year. The other thing that we did was we're going to finance the rates are so low right now for interest rates that we're going to go ahead and finance our Lido Fire Station construction over a 10-year period. And to do that, it's going to cost us very little, but it's buying us some financial security this year and amortizing it over the 10-year period. Even though that building should be about 40, 50-year building, we'll still pay it off over 10 years. And then the ISF reductions, that I will tell you, that is very wonky. I'm not going to get into why we did that. We also have contingency reserves. So just so everybody knows, Newport Beach is kind of alone in how much we hold in reserve because we frankly plan for black swan events. This is a black swan event. And so we had over $50 million in our contingency reserve. We actually have around 52. So we were planning on drawing down 2 million of the contingency reserve. Fortunately, revenues are coming in better, much stronger than we had planned for. So our contingency reserve will be replenished very quickly. And then police department. So our police department's done an unbelievable job this year. I'm pointing out that this ad on the right-hand side was actually put into the Daily Pilot. This is a half-page ad. After we ran the half-page ad, and it was paid for by what I will say an anonymous donor who really just wanted our police department to know how much they were appreciated. The anonymous donor reached out to me and just said, "Hey, I'm going to pay for this. Do you think you can get some names to put on a message like this?" And I laughed and I said, "You're going to have to just stop me at some point." And he did. So we had this first half page. So many people saw the half page, they wanted their name on it, that it actually ended up getting run as a full page by doubling the number of names. It was fantastic. So we've got a lot of support in our community for our police department for good reason. Our view on our police department is that we need to recruit the best, we need to retain the best, and we need to train the best. And we've done a really good job of all of that. And I think people are rightfully proud of their police department, especially as they're watching deficiencies in other police departments around the country. And so we expect very high standards of them. They expect very high standards of themselves. And so, as we were watching protests going on, we had 5 in a day earlier this year about police issues. To our police department's credit, they made sure everybody was safe. They made sure that any incidents were addressed very quickly, and a couple of people were arrested, as I'm sure some of you know. But the point there is that our police department has really stepped up in a very, very difficult year. Our fire department, same thing. So our fire department over the last 60, 70 days has been outside, that we've had personnel outside the city for at least the last 60 days. It's unbelievable. We've got, right now in the state, over 4 million acres have burned. I don't know how to put that in context. It's bigger than the state of Connecticut has burned in California. And we have had people, we've had firefighters, we still have them out on the front lines fighting the fires all around our state. And so probably a good reminder that they work 48-hour shifts. Some of them will say bye to their families, and then they'll be gone for 2 weeks because they'll be fighting fire, and they just get called, they have a go bag, and they go. And then housing. So I want to talk a little bit about RHNA. So you probably all know regional housing, that stands for Regional Housing Needs Assessment. And I thought that this was going to be the biggest issue in my year as mayor. And I was wrong, like really, really wrong. But I thought this is absolutely what I thought was going to be the #1 issue. And trust me, it's a huge issue and it has long-lasting impacts. It's just not the most important issue that we faced. In fact, not only was it turned out not to be the most important issue we faced, we actually didn't even have a meeting of our subcommittee on this for the housing committee until July, maybe even August. And I thought by August I actually would be up in Sacramento begging the state housing and community development department. I thought I'd be up, our agency, I thought I'd be up at HCD begging them for help and relief. And clearly that wasn't going to happen because we actually didn't even have our final RHNA number until September. And last night we approved an appeal of that number. And I encourage everyone to actually go read it. It's long, don't get me wrong. It's like 30 pages and it's not exactly the scintillating details that you'd want to be reading with your off time, but I still encourage you to read it because what it does is it breaks down why geographically and administratively, we don't have the ability to put in that over 4,000 units into our city. And part of that is because only 45% or so of our city is not covered by another agency. So you have about 1/3 of the city covered by the Coastal Commission that oftentimes will say, it's nice that you want to do building, not so much here in our coastal zone. And then around the airport area, which is where everyone would like to see most of this development, the problem with that is you're covered by actually multiple agencies. So you have the FAA, you have the county, you have actually, interestingly enough, Caltrans. And so there's a lot of, and the other thing we're having a big problem in Newport Coast with right now is that the state keeps changing their fire hazard maps. And so they've designated a lot of the area around Newport Coast as a high-risk fire zone. And because of that, people are losing their insurance. I can't even imagine trying to build. And so I'm pointing all of this out to say, I think it's worth noting that the city of Newport Beach has never been anti-housing, but the city of Newport Beach is anti-being told by one agency to do one thing and being told by 10 agencies not to do it. And so we're stuck in this really, really hard place. Probably one of the good examples I didn't list actually is FEMA. If we want to build houses, there's this row of houses right now on the peninsula. If they want to rebuild, they've got to go up on stilts. It's the craziest thing, but that's where we are. So in a city of 45,000 housing units, we're expected to build 4,834 new housing units. Half of that needs to be low or very low income. Very low income is defined by a family of 4 making less than $60,000 a year. We are also working through the financial implications of that. Is there any developer willing to do that? Can they even afford to buy property in Newport Beach and sell and rent it to a family of 4 making less than $60,000? The answer is no, without extraordinary subsidy. And I don't think the state's going to give us $1 billion to do that. So pre-COVID, our council agreed unanimously that we would respond to this in 3 ways. One is we're going to push back politically. One is we're going to push back legally. The other is we're going to try to find compliance. And we're doing all 3 of those. We've been doing all 3 of those since even during COVID. We're going to continue to do that. Last night, the pushback legally was on that front. Pushback politically, we've been trying to get legislation introduced. Our local state assemblywoman did introduce some legislation. It got killed by the senator, his name's Scott Wiener. Got killed on that front. So we're going to be in a pretty tough spot. The other thing that is just, we're going to have a really hard time with is meeting the timeline. So in theory, we're supposed to get to HCD a compliant housing element by October of 2021, which means that we probably needed to have actually already approved our housing element at the council level and put it out for an EIR. Obviously that has not happened. And so we are going to be really trying hard to figure out how to get to a point where we do not get sued by HCD at the end of this, because we really don't want to start down the path of potentially losing our autonomy. Let me talk real quickly about homelessness. So Project Room Key is a state process program that they've created where it's actually been a pretty good program, especially for the city of Newport Beach. We are in a position right now where we've actually been able to house quite a few people And in fact, 95% of the people in Project Roomkey are now actually documented for housing placement. We have a lot of success stories this year. And actually, 2 years ago, before we had created a housing ad hoc or homelessness committee and really addressed this, we were looking at a point in time count of around a little over 60. Right now, we're in the mid-20s and people who are homeless on our streets in Newport Beach. I will say the problem is they're very clustered, and the folks who are homeless in our city right now are they're a little bit more resistant than I think we've been experiencing recently, and so we're seeing an uptick in concerns at places like Marina Park and the piers. So we're working really hard right now. We've got a great team around us. We've made a lot of progress, and we have a lot more progress to be made. I will say, talking to mayors and other cities right now, they're experiencing the same thing. Unfortunately, they're seeing an uptick. In large part, it's because, yes, people can't be evicted from their apartments, but they're seeing their debt racking up pretty dramatically because they're not paying their apartment, and they know at some point they're going to have to pay. So some people are just leaving and becoming homeless. So we're just seeing an uptick, and I think we're going to continue to, unfortunately, see an uptick. So we need to be vigilant on this issue. Unfortunately, we have great resources available to us. And so we're going to continue to do that. Real quick, if you're not following me on Instagram or Facebook, I'd encourage you to do so. These are my campaign sites. I'm doing quick daily updates Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. A lot of people are reading them. And I'm trying really hard to just keep people educated about what's going on inside our city and what's going on around the state, try to really explain, because I get so many questions. There's so much change happening in the last 6 months, constantly changing. And so people ask me questions and I try to answer them through this. We have elections, you all know this. In Newport Beach specifically, we've got 3 city council elections. Quick reminder to everybody, we have districts. You have to live in a district to run for that seat, but we run citywide. There are great reasons to do that. We are a city of villages. I think it makes a lot of sense for someone to live, for example, on Balboa Island, but also have to represent Newport Coast and the peninsula. Same thing, peninsula, you just think about our city. Newport Coast is totally different than CDM, which is totally different than Balboa Island and the Heights and the peninsula and Port Streets and East Bluff. And so we expect a lot of people to have different. We want people to get that vibe, that feel like they know what's going on in that city or in that area, but we don't want them only beholden to those folks. I think the best example, frankly, is my district up in District 7, which is Newport Coast. You really don't want someone in District 7 only beholden to people behind gates. Because if you do that, then you're going to start incentivizing that particular person to bring resources into an area that doesn't need the same amount of resources as the island or Balboa Island or the peninsula, where you need a lot more resources because a lot of older infrastructure, a lot more crime, a lot more people. And so it just makes sense the way we've laid it out in this hybrid model. So we've got in District 2, Brad Avery, who's the incumbent, running against Nancy Scarborough. We've got District 5, which is Jeff Herdman, who's the incumbent, running against Noah Blom. In District 7, I am unopposed. And then Measure Z. Measure Z, I'm an author of, so I'm very partial to it. But Measure Z is adding the Harbor Commission into our charter. Our charter is kind of like our Constitution. It's the only thing the City Council cannot change. Because we can't change it is the reason why we're putting this forward. It would basically put the Harbor Commission on the same level as the Arts Commission, the Planning Commission, Parks, Beach and Rec Commission, Civil Service Commission, and the Board of Library Trustees, and it would prohibit the future councils from just deleting it if they didn't like the advice. And then Year the Volunteer. At the beginning of this year, back in December, I should say, I called 2020 the Year of the Volunteer. And the reason for that was because I really wanted to emphasize all the amazing things people do to make our city better. And this year has not looked the way that I expected, but it's still the Year of the Volunteer, and I'm seeing some of the best in the Newport Beach coming out, especially in a year of really difficult situations. There are a lot of people continuing to check in on each other. At the beginning of this pandemic, you probably remember toilet paper was something you couldn't get. And so a lot of our restaurants use their vendors to get a ton of toilet paper and then make sure that low-income seniors were getting it and making sure that they were, selling it at cost to people who who couldn't get it at grocery stores. Like it's just the funniest stuff that has happened. But every time someone steps up to fill that gap in need, and especially in a year where we know how hard the mental strain is on so many people for so many reasons, having people just think about calling a friend and asking them how they're doing. My guess is that if you're on this call right now, you know someone who has lost a spouse, who has lost a father or a mother, and they weren't able to properly give funeral to that person. I really encourage you, if you're hearing this and you can think of that one person, maybe reach out today. Send a text message, call, just have coffee with them and just check in on them. That's one of the ways we've got to get through this is as a community. And I will tell you, I've never been prouder of our city and our community. So I've left some time for Q&A. Here's our picture of 2020, which, no, hang on. No, this is our picture of 2020. There you go. So anyway, we've had a rough year, but I know Newport Beach is going to come out of this okay. I really do. I've seen it. I know at the city level that we're going to be okay. And I am confident. I really am. I am confident we're going to come out of this as a city. And we're going to keep moving forward because that's what Newport Beach has always done. That's what Newport Beach is doing. And that's what Newport Beach will do. So with that, I will take any questions. There's probably a topic. There's no topic, frankly, I haven't covered at some point or another. So I'm happy to take anything you throw at me. All right. How do I stop sharing now?
Anybody from the membership want to ask Mayor O'Neill any questions regarding his presentation or? Okay.
We have a hand up from, well, Mark Todd, but it disappeared. So Mark, would you like to ask a question?
Here, I
Need to mute yourself.
Sorry about that. Yes, I wanted to see about the Airbnb and the leasing, the short-term rental issues that we have. Where's the mayor on that stance? And because I know a lot of it was happening during COVID, and we were not able to participate as much as we would like to have done.
Well, we had a meeting last night that took us 6 hours, and the primary topic was short-term lodging. So my guess is that this is going to be a short answer. And where I am on it actually is not in line with the majority of council. And so I should probably preface by saying I was in the minority on our vote last night. So quick answer to that is early on, there was a concern about short-term lodging. And so there's an emergency ordinance that basically froze and no longer allows for the issuance of new permits. I don't think that we should be doing that anymore. I don't believe that that emergency ordinance should still be in place. That the emergency at that time was a very different moment in our city and a very different moment than what we know where we are now. I cannot get a majority of council at the moment, at least to agree with me. I made that point last night. It didn't gain traction. The other thing that the other aspect of that is we did pass a bunch of regulations 2 months ago, I believe. Maybe around. It feels like 2 years ago, but I think it was around 2 months ago. And those have come into play. They now require an emergency phone line and a lot. Hopefully a lot more data is going to be gathered on that, so we can have a better understanding. Last night, the City Council passed a slew of new regulations as well. So there was a vote last night to make a cap on the number of short-term lodging permits at 1,550. There was a transferability provision in there. There was a requirement that people be 25 or older. There was a 3-night minimum. I think I'm missing one thing. All of that.
Wasn't there an issue with parking tickets that they be attached to the property owner?
Yeah, then we changed that. So we made sure to clarify that that's not the case. Apparently, that wasn't the intent of the language that was presented to us. I made a big issue of that. The city attorney explained it, changed the language, and so the parking ticket issue, it goes more toward a violation of the toward a potential revocation hearing than trying to attach the actual fine to the property owner. I will say I voted no on that. It was a 4-3 vote. I voted no on that for a handful of reasons. One of them actually was a procedural one. I don't think we followed the local coastal plan procedure properly, and I think we're going to get slammed by the Coastal Commission for it. But that's one issue. Another issue, I think that if we're going to have a wholesale modification of an industry that has existed in our city for over 100 years, that maybe we should actually have the data to support it. And I asked last night about the violations that have occurred at short-term lodging, at short-term lodging. So, I mean, how many actual municipal code violations have we issued? The answer over the last couple of years is about 30. I asked, okay, well, how many, when our police department goes out and gives DACs, which are the disturbance advisory cards, how many of those have we issued in the last 2 years? And the answer was less than 30. I know I hear from residents all the time, but the problem is when we're actually passing laws, we need to actually do it based on a lot of data. And whether that makes me wonky or not, that's a pretty strong opinion that I hold. And so I wasn't willing to go that far, but again, I was in the minority on that vote, and I respect the process. I'm not in the majority on all votes. That's one of the things about being in local government, and that's where I am. I do think that we need to find that healthy balance. We have seen an increase in the number of short-term lodging to a point where enforcement needs to happen a lot more aggressively, frankly. So I suspect that that's probably where we'll head. But we also passed that second round of regulations, and we'll see what happens when it goes to coastal.
Well, I like your opinion about making sure you're looking at the data first. A lot of people are going on hunches, I believe, and I think leadership is about doing what's right and not what's popular. So thank you.
I appreciate that. Yeah.
I actually have a question. I know you talked about Prop 15 and protecting Prop 13. How are you voting on Prop 19? And what is your understanding on that proposition and how it affects Prop 13?
Yeah, I think Prop 19 is the most complicated proposition we have on our ballot. I like aspects of Prop 19. I really like aspects of Prop 19. I think all the reasons that the realtors like Prop 19 are the reasons Prop 19 would be great if you could just carve out those reasons. I think that the main problem with Prop 19 is it's a massive tax increase. And look, I get it. Politics are really, really messy. And so when you're trying, this issue kind of it failed. And so it's come back, and the way it's come back is by stepping up that increase on the transfers within families. And then it also takes some of the money and make sure that it's going toward fire relief victims, which I like. I like the fact that this would have allowed for a Prop 13 hold on people who are affected by wildfires or natural disasters. There's no reason for us to ever step their Prop 13 basis if they're being affected like that. I like that aspect of it. I like the transferability aspect of it within counties. Those are great things. But when you couple that with a massive increase on the taxes that come with transferability within generations and families and things like that, you also couple it with, I will say I'm very cynical on this point, with trying to bring in the fire associations by setting aside money into a specific fund. I think that the bad outweighs the good. I would love to see the good come back separately. I would vote for that all day long. I will vote for it, frankly, all day long because it has been on the ballot before. And I do like when we have that transferability ability for people, especially when they're seniors, because we shouldn't be incentivizing people to hold a 5-bedroom house just because they would, if they sold it and moved, their property taxes would price them out of California. There's no reason for us to do that. We should be wanting people as a society to sell those homes to up and coming young families who need those 4- and 5-bedroom places so that people can, get the 2-bedroom, 1-bedroom bungalow near the beach or in Corona del Mar. So the more we can incentivize that, the better off we are. I think, again, coming back, I can't properly do justice to 19. It is so complicated. I'm personally going to vote no because I think the bad outweighs the good, but there's a lot of good there, and I'd love to see it come back with the good.
Agreed. Too many layers. So thank you for sharing it so in depth, because I think a lot of people miss a layer there. So
I think people miss layers all the time, and that's part of the deal. Is look, I really appreciate everybody who's actually on this call, because you heard a lot of substance, and I hope that it didn't bother you that I went so deep on this stuff, because I think there are too many elected officials right now who are doing what I kind of call hashtag policies. They're like, oh, let me tell you something that sounds really good, and I've soundbited it, and I've never been good at that. I really enjoy getting into the weeds and talking about things and just educating you so you can make decisions for yourself. I place a really high premium on making sure that the people have the education, have the knowledge, and then they can make the calls for themselves. I don't know what's best for your life. And I think that I mentioned humility already. I'd love for more elected officials to say that. I'd like more people to say, look, I don't know what's best for you personally, but what I can do is I can create an environment that keeps you safe. I can create an environment that allows for you to make those decisions for yourself. And even if I wouldn't have made those decisions myself, you get to, as long as you're not negatively affecting another person in a way that society has deemed illegal. And I think that that's really where we need to come back to, is I want more people to know more information that is relevant to their lives so they can make decisions that are informed. And is there perfect information? No. And the thing about being on city council is you recognize that really fast. This year in particular, you are constantly having to make decisions, because the truth is an indecision is still a decision. Choosing not to make a decision is going to be that decision that you have to wrap your head around this. And this year in particular, there are a ton of decisions that have to be made with incomplete information. And you have to be okay with that, but you also have to be willing to come back to that decision if you made a bad one. And I think that this council at times has made bad decisions this year. I've made bad decisions this year looking back on it. I think it was a good decision in the moment, but I think we can come back and correct that. And so that's where I'm coming back around to this, is we just don't have enough folks in elected office right now willing to admit mistakes. And so if you've made one, admit it and try to correct it. But I also am not overly harsh on elected officials this year who have made mistakes at times, because I don't know the complete information. And one last thing, I'm just gonna make a point on this, is like schools, for example. I'm not in the meetings with teachers. I'm not in the meetings with principals. I'm not in the meetings with administrators. And so I have largely stayed out of the push on the school openings. I have very strong thoughts on this, but I don't share them very often because I am not on the school board. And I think it's really important that I not cause their jobs to be more difficult, because I know how hard my job is. And I would hate for them to spout off and make some comment that makes my job a lot harder because they're not involved in the day-to-day and understand what the dynamics are. I don't understand what the dynamics are over there. I will be a partner for them, and I will continue to help them when they need it. And I will make sure that if they need, for example, before the school year, they decided to push the secondary into, I don't know, November or December or whenever they're going to start it. CDM High School reached out and said, look, we're not going to be bringing the kids back on Wednesdays. Could you switch your street sweeping schedule so that they can park along the road, and then you can do the street sweeping on Wednesdays? We said, yep. So the city will be a partner. We will continue to be a partner for our school district, for other things like that. But you got to know what you don't know, and not make other people's jobs harder when it's already hard enough this year.
yeah, great topic to touch on. Thank you for doing that.
Yeah, so maybe time for one more question. If not, I'm happy to wrap up.
Anybody else have a question for Mayor O'Neill?
I don't see any in the chat or the Q&A section.
All right. Well, I just want to say thank you then. It really matters to me that you were willing to spend an hour with me and just listen and find out what's going on in the city. I am very accessible. Most of you know that. Probably most of you have my cell number. So if you want to reach out and just follow up on any of this, please do so. If you ever want to reach out and just talk, go ahead. I know how important your job is. I know exactly how important it is for our city's finances. So I will continue to support you. I will continue to find ways to make sure that your jobs are easier and better and frankly more productive for our city. And so I just want to say, for everything that you've done this year, all the ways that you have adapted to a new environment, to open houses that you've now tried to figure out how to get done, just want to say thanks, because it means a lot. It means a lot to our overall city, and we'll continue to fight for you. So I appreciate the time. very, very much. And I'll take any questions offline that you might have.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us today.